Billionaire watches waiter get fired for carrying his sick little brother. Then she steps in and destroys everyone who laughed. The rain had been falling since noon. Marcus Webb, 22 years old, had been on his feet since 6 in the morning. His blue apron was soaked through from running between the kitchen and the tables. His sneakers squeaked against the wet linoleum every time he turned a corner. Outside, the Augusta, Georgia sky had turned the color of ash, and the strip mall parking lot had transformed into a shallow lake of gray water and floating receipts. Carver's Diner sat at the end of that strip mall, a mid-range restaurant with red vinyl booths, laminated menus, and a neon sign in the window that buzzed faintly when the weather was bad. Marcus had worked there for 11 months. He was never late. He never called out sick. He memorized regulars' orders without being asked, covered shifts when coworkers had emergencies, and sent every spare dollar home to help his mother pay the electricity bill. He was, by every measure, the best employee Carver's Diner had. Today, none of that would matter. It started at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus was balancing 3 plates on his forearm, chicken fried steak, a club sandwich, and a bowl of soup, when his phone vibrated in his apron pocket. He ignored it. A minute later, it vibrated again. Then again. The buzzing was insistent, anxious, the kind of pattern that made something cold move through his chest even before he checked the screen. He set the plates down at table 7, smiled at the customers, and slipped into the back hallway near the supply closet. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. Bright Futures Daycare. His hands were already moving as he dialed back. The phone rang once before someone picked up. Marcus. It was Ms. Patterson, the daycare supervisor. Her voice was tight and carefully controlled. The voice of someone trying not to alarm a person they were about to alarm. Eli collapsed during quiet time. He's running a fever of 104. We've tried your mother 4 times and can't reach her. You're listed as the secondary emergency contact. The hallway felt very small suddenly. Is he conscious? Marcus asked. Yes, he's awake. But he's asking for you, and with his history, we really think... I'm coming, Marcus said. Right now. He hung up. For exactly 3 seconds. He stood completely still in that narrow hallway. The sounds of the diner washing over him, the clatter of dishes, someone laughing at the counter, the cook calling out an order number. He thought about his manager. He thought about the lunch rush that still had 40 minutes left. He thought about the 3 tables he had opened. Then he thought about Eli. He untied his apron, hung it on the hook by the back door, and walked out into the rain. Elijah Webb was 6 years old, and he had never had an easy day in his body. He was born with a congenital heart defect that required surgery before his first birthday. At 3, he was diagnosed with moderate asthma. The combination of the 2 conditions meant that a fever wasn't just a fever for Eli. It was a door that could open into something much darker, very fast. Marcus had learned this the hard way when Eli was 4 and a simple cold turned into a 3-day hospital stay that nearly broke their mother completely. Since then, Marcus had taken Eli's health personally. He knew which medications Eli needed and in what doses. He knew the warning signs, the way Eli's breathing changed before an attack, the particular stillness that meant he was fighting something his small body couldn't handle alone. He had been the one at every doctor's appointment their mother couldn't make because she was working. He had been the one who stayed up through the night when Eli's breathing was bad, sitting beside the bed with one hand on his brother's chest just to feel it rise and fall. Their mother, Denise Webb, worked double shifts at a commercial laundry facility across town. She took the bus. She didn't always have phone signal. She gave everything she had to keep the lights on and food in the refrigerator. And Marcus had never once heard her complain about it. But the weight of 2 jobs and 2 children had settled into the lines around her eyes. And Marcus had silently promised himself years ago that he would carry as much of that weight as he possibly could. He ran the 4 blocks to Bright Futures Daycare without stopping. Eli was sitting on a plastic chair near the front desk when Marcus pushed through the door, dripping rain onto the welcome mat. The boy looked small and pale, his dark eyes glassy with fever, his small hands folded in his lap like he was trying very hard to be brave. When he saw Marcus, Something in his face crumpled with relief. The particular relief of a child who has been frightened and alone and has just seen the one person who makes the world feel safe again. "You came," Eli said. His voice was hoarse. "I always come," Marcus said. He was already crouching down, pressing the back of his hand to Eli's forehead, checking his breathing, scanning his face the way he had taught himself to do over years of quiet vigilance. The fever was real. Eli's chest was moving unevenly. "My tummy hurts," Eli murmured. "I know, buddy." "We're going to fix it." Marcus signed the release form, collected Eli's emergency medical bag from Ms. Patterson, and stepped back outside. He pulled Eli up against his chest, the boy's arms wrapping automatically around his neck, his head dropping onto Marcus's shoulder with the full weight of exhaustion. Marcus tucked one arm under Eli's legs, curved his body forward to shield the boy from the rain, and started walking. The nearest urgent care clinic that accepted their insurance was 6 blocks away. The bus wouldn't come for another 40 minutes. Marcus had no car and had never had a car. He had $112 in his checking account and a terminated job he didn't know about yet. He walked, head down, step steady, rain pouring off his shoulders. 2 blocks from the clinic, his phone rang again. Derek Simmons had managed Carver's Diner for 9 years. He was a compact, red-faced man who kept a laminated copy of the employee handbook behind the host stand and genuinely believed that consistency meant treating every situation the same regardless of context. He was not a cruel man exactly. He was something arguably worse. A man who had confused rigidity with fairness for so long that he could no longer tell the difference. "Marcus." His voice on the phone was flat and clipped. "You walked off my floor in the middle of a lunch rush. You left 3 tables uncovered. Do you understand what that does to my staff?" Marcus was breathing hard, walking fast, Eli's weight shifting against his chest. "My brother collapsed, Derek. He's got a heart condition. I'm taking him to urgent care right now. I don't care if the president himself needed a ride to the hospital. You don't walk off a shift without authorization. That's in the handbook. Page 7. I didn't have time to—" "You're done, Marcus. Don't come back for your next shift. I'll mail your last check." The line went dead. Marcus stood still on the wet sidewalk for a moment, the rain hitting the back of his neck, Eli breathing quietly against his shoulder. He looked at the phone screen. He looked at his brother's face. Eli's eyes were closed now, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven rhythms. Marcus put the phone back in his pocket and kept walking. Eleanor Voss had not planned to be in Augusta that afternoon. At 71, she was the founder and controlling shareholder of Voss Capital Group, a private equity firm that managed assets worth an estimated $4 billion. She had offices in Atlanta, Charlotte, and New York. She flew private. She had a personal assistant, a security consultant, and a standing reservation at the best restaurant in whatever city she happened to be in. She had grown up 40 miles outside Augusta, the daughter of a tobacco farmer named Robert Voss, who lost his entire harvest, and the farm itself, to a flood when Eleanor was 12 years old. She remembered standing in the mud watching the water take everything, her father's hand on her shoulder, his voice steady even as his face was doing something she had never seen it do before. She had never forgotten that voice, or that hand. She had built her fortune over 40 years, through a combination of genuine brilliance, merciless focus, and a particular talent for identifying the kind of people that most institutions overlooked, people whose character revealed itself not in boardrooms or presentations, but in the quiet, costly moments when no one was watching, and doing the right thing had a real price attached to it. She had stopped at the strip mall to take a call in her car while her driver went to get the vehicle serviced. When the rain intensified, she had walked into Carver's Diner, taken the corner booth, and ordered black coffee. She was on her second cup when Derek Simmons came out of the back office. He stood near the host stand and spoke to the hostess in a voice loud enough for the nearest 4 booths to hear clearly. He said that Marcus Webb had been terminated. He said that some people thought having a family was an excuse to treat their job like an option. He said he ran a business, not a daycare. He said it with the satisfied expression of a man who believed he had just made a principled stand. The hostess nodded. A busboy kept his eyes on the floor, Eleanor wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and said nothing. Then she looked out the window. Through the rain-blurred glass, she saw him, a young man in a soaked blue apron, moving with urgent purpose along the sidewalk outside. He was carrying a small child, a boy, maybe 5 or 6, pressed against his chest. One large hand spread across the child's back, his whole upper body curved forward like a shield, trying to keep the rain off the boy's face. The young man's expression was tight with worry. His clothes completely soaked, his shoes dark with water, but his steps were even, deliberate, focused. He did not look like someone who had given up. He looked like someone who had already decided. Eleanor watched until they disappeared around the corner of the building. Then she set down her coffee cup very carefully, reached into her coat pocket and took out her phone. She made 2 calls. The urgent care clinic on Broad Street saw Eli within 20 minutes of arrival. The diagnosis was a severe respiratory infection, compounded by a fever spike. Dangerous for any child, but particularly serious given Eli's cardiac history. The attending physician told Marcus that he had made the right call coming in when he did. Another hour, and they would have been looking at a hospital admission. Eli was given a breathing treatment, 2 medications, and a juice box. He fell asleep on the exam cot with Marcus sitting beside him, one hand resting lightly on the boy's back. The bill was $340. Marcus stared at it for a long time. He did the math in his head 3 different ways, hoping one of them would come out differently. None of them did. He had $112 his next paycheck, which was no longer coming, would have been $380. He thought about calling his mother, then decided against it. She was already at work. There was nothing she could do from across town with no car and no money to spare. He folded the bill and put it in his pocket. He was still sitting there, staring at the waiting room wall, when the door opened and a woman walked in. She was older, early 70s. Marcus guessed, with silver hair, pulled back simply, and a gray coat that looked expensive without announcing itself. She walked into the urgent care waiting room like she walked into every room, without hesitation, without looking around for permission. She scanned the space once and sat down directly across from Marcus. He looked at her with the mild wariness of someone who had been having a very bad day and wasn't sure it was over. "Your name is Marcus Webb," she said. "Yeah." He straightened slightly. "Do I know you?" "No. I was at the diner when your manager announced he'd fired you." She paused. "I was also at the window when you walked past carrying your brother." Marcus looked away. His jaw tightened. "I don't need anybody feeling sorry for me." "I'm not here because I feel sorry for you," Eleanor said. Her voice was even and direct, without warmth or coldness, just clarity. "I'm here because I've spent 50 years trying to find people who make the right decision when it's expensive, and I watched you do that today." He looked back at her. "I have a regional office here in Augusta," she continued. "I need people who show up, not people who follow handbooks." She reached into her coat pocket and placed a business card on the chair beside him. "Come in on Thursday, 9 o'clock. Ask for Sandra at the front desk." She stood up. She looked once toward the exam room where Eli was sleeping. "How is he?" she asked. "He'll be okay," Marcus said. "Thanks to—" He stopped. "Thanks." Eleanor nodded once. Then she walked back out into the rain. Marcus showed up on Thursday at 8:47 a.m., in a pressed dress shirt and the only pair of slacks he owned. He sat across from 3 senior managers and answered every question directly and without pretense. He talked about Eli. He talked about his mother. He talked about what it meant to be responsible for people who depended on you and how that had shaped every decision he had ever made. He was offered the position of operations coordinator trainee before the week was out. The salary was more than 4 times what Carver's Diner had paid him. Derek Simmons lasted 11 more days as manager of Carver's Diner. The TU property group that handled the restaurant's lease renewal, quietly connected to Voss, Capital's real estate holdings, initiated an unscheduled compliance review. Derek resigned before it concluded. Nobody who had been in that diner was particularly surprised. 6 months later, Marcus sat across from Eleanor, Voss in her 14th floor office overlooking the Savannah River. The Georgia sky outside was enormous and clear and impossibly blue. "Why did you really do it?" he asked her. "You could have just kept drinking your coffee." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "When I was 12 years old," she said finally, "my father carried me on his back through 2 miles of floodwater to get me to dry ground. We lost the farm that year. We lost almost everything." She looked out the window. "But he put me on his back first, before he tried to save anything else." She paused. "I've been looking for people like that my whole career. People who carry others first." Marcus didn't say anything for a long moment. He looked down at his hands and the hands that had carried Eli through the rain, through the fear, through the cost of doing what was right, and understood something about himself that he had never been able to put into words before. It wasn't a weakness. It had never been a weakness. Eli started 2nd grade that September. He wore a brand new backpack covered in rocket ships, a gift left anonymously at their door, and he walked into school with his chest out and his chin up, the way his brother had taught him. Marcus watched him go through the school gate and thought about rain, and about the people who shield you from it, and about what it means when the world finally sees you clearly. Some people call it luck. Marcus Webb calls it proof. Proof that when you carry someone else through the storm, when you choose love over convenience, and duty over comfort, and people over paychecks, the right eyes are always watching, and the right doors always open.